The music was a physical thing, a thrumming bass that vibrated through the soles of my shoes, and up into my bones. The lights were these great sweeping arcs of color, blues and pinks and yellows. So bright they left little afterimages when you blinked, and the laughter, it was everywhere, this constant cascading sound that seemed to bounce off the high ceiling. You know, the sound of a party in full swing, that low hum of a dozen separate conversations, all happening at once, the sharp, happy punctuation of a glass clinking against another. It was all so perfect, so meticulously joyful, and I was right in the middle of it, a cog in the machine of celebration. I saw the change happen in real time. It was like watching a curtain fall. The polite, sociable mask she had been wearing all evening just dissolved. The careful composure in her face melted away, and what was left underneath was raw, unvarnished, and terrifyingly honest. The air around us seemed to grow still and cold, even as the party swirled on. Are leaving, and they need to be absolutely certain that they can come back. So you have to endure the eye rolls, the sighs, the muttered comments. You have to let them have their space, even when it hurts. Your presence is a constant, even if it's in the background for a while. This shift doesn't last forever. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's fueled by maturity and a changing perspective. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for judgment, impulse control, and long-term planning, isn't fully developed until the mid-20s. As it matures, their ability to see nuance returns. They start to understand that social standing isn't everything. They begin to appreciate the value of life experience. Often it's their friends who catalyze this shift. Their friends who come from different backgrounds might see you differently. They might comment on your cool job or your kindness or your sense of humor. And your teenager, hearing this from an outside source, starts to see you through a new lens. They begin the work of integrating their identity. They realize they don't have to choose between being a part of their family and being their own person. They can be both. The family self and the social self start to merge into a more complex whole individual. The things that were once sources of embarrassment can become points of connection, even endearment. That silly joke you always tell might become a nostalgic touchstone. The way you dance might become a funny family story. The perception shifts from seeing you as a threat to their identity to seeing you as a part of their unique story. And this is where the real opportunity lies. After the storm of adolescence passes, you have the chance to build a new kind of relationship, an adult relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than parental authority. This is the reward for weathering the embarrassment phase. It starts with open communication, not in a heavy confrontational way, but with lightness and understanding. You can even joke about it. Remember when you wouldn't be seen with me in the grocery store talking about that past phase? Openly demystifies it. It shows your teenager, who is now a young adult, that you understood what was happening all along, that you saw the bigger picture, even when they couldn't. It builds a profound sense of trust. They realize you were on their side, even when it seemed like you were on opposite teams. This new relationship is stronger because it has been tested. It's a resilient bond that can withstand life's real challenges, not just the social anxieties of high school. You become a confidant, a guide, a true supporter. The embarrassment fades, and what replaces it is a deeper, more authentic connection, one where they see you not just as a parent, but as a person with flaws, yes, but also with a history, with love, and with a steadfast presence that they eventually come to appreciate as one of the great constants of their life. It gets better, it really does. The quiet in the house after Shed gone to bed was always a heavy kind of quiet, not peaceful, not really. It was the quiet where I could hear every single thing I might have done wrong that day. The dinner I burned because I was on a work call, the way I tried to braid her hair in the morning, and it ended up a lopsided mess. The school project I forgot about until the last minute. It was in that quiet that I'd feel the weight of it all. This job I never expected to do alone. I remember the first time I had to take her to a mother-daughter event at school. It was a cupcake decorating thing. All these moms were there laughing, sharing stories, their hands moving with a practiced ease. And then there was me, a big guy with frosting all over my fingers, trying to pipe a rose and just making a pink blob. She was 7. She kept looking at the other girls at their perfect cupcakes, and then back at mine. She didn't say anything, but her little shoulders were slumped. I felt like I was wearing a sign that said not good enough. That feeling, that fear of failing her, of her feeling like she was missing out because of me, that became the background noise of my life. Her shoulders straightened. She turned to face me fully, and the people around us sensing the shift subtly drifted away, giving us a small bubble of space in the middle of the celebration. Her voice when she spoke was low, but it cut through the music, and the chatter with the precision of a scalpel. It trembled, yes, there was a vibration of deep emotion in it, but it was firm, resolute. I tried so hard to be everything, the one who set the rules and enforced the curfew, but also the one she could cry to about a broken heart. I'd read books about raising teenage girls, trying to understand the mood swings, the need for space mixed with the need for connection. I wanted to be involved, but I was so scared of being overbearing, of pushing her away. Every decision felt like walking a tightrope. Do I ask about her day? Or does that feel like an interrogation? Do I let her go to that party? Or am I being irresponsible? There was no one to check with, no one to share the burden, the pressure of being the only parent. She had the only one responsible for turning this little girl into a good, happy person. It was a weight that never lifted. And then came the phase where everything I did was wrong. It started around when she turned 14 suddenly. The way I dressed was embarrassing, the car I drove was embarrassing, the way I said hello to her friends was a crime. I'd pick her up from school, and she'd slide into the passenger seat, without a word, sinking down so no one would see her. I'd try to make conversation. How was your day? I'd ask. Fine, she'd mutter, staring at her phone like it was a lifeline. The silence in the car was 1,000 times heavier than the silence in the house at night. It was a wall she was building brick by brick. The big moment, the one that really cut deep, happened at her 16th birthday party. I had spent weeks planning it. I made all the food myself, her favorite things. I strung up lights in the backyard, made a playlist I thought she'd like. I was so proud of it. I wanted it to be perfect for her. Her friends were all there, laughing, music playing. I was in my element, grilling burgers, refilling the chip bowl, just happy to see her smiling. I saw her talking with a group of her friends by the fence. I thought I'd be the cool dad, bring them some fresh drinks. I walked over, smiling, holding out a tray of sodas. Anyone need a refill? I said. One of her friends smiled and said, thanks, Mr. Miller. But my daughter, her face just fell, her smile vanished. She looked at me with this mixture of pity and pure horror. She took the tray from me, her voice low and tight. Dad, I can do it, just go back to the grill. I felt my smile freeze on my face. I just nodded and walked away, my back to them. I stood by the grill pretending to check the burgers that were already done, and I heard her, not quite a whisper, but loud enough for me to catch it. She said to her friends, God, he's so embarrassing, he doesn't get it. The rest of the party happened around me, but I wasn't really there. The laughter sounded hollow, the lights seemed too bright. Every time I looked at her, I saw this teenager who was deeply ashamed of the man who had raised her. All I could think was, my best isn't good enough. All the sleepless nights, the skipped promotions at work, so I could be home for her, the burnt dinners, the failed hair braids. It all culminated in this one moment, where I was just an embarrassment. It felt like a rejection of everything I was, everything I had tried to be for her. After that, the distance grew. She spent more time in her room. Conversations were strictly functional. What do you want for dinner? Doesn't matter. Need a ride? I'll get one. It was the most painful kind of loneliness, being alone in the same house with the person you love most in the world. Steal me away, she repeated, and the words were laced with something bitter. When have you ever wanted to do that? When have you ever wanted to have a real conversation? The shift happened slowly, and it started from a place I never expected. Her friends. She started bringing one of them over more often, a girl named Chloe. Chloe was always polite to me, but I kept my distance, not wanting to trigger another episode of embarrassment. I'd just say hello and retreat to the kitchen or my office. One evening, I was in the kitchen making dinner. I could hear them talking in the living room, their voices carrying down the hall. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but hear Chloe said, your dad is so nice. He always has dinner ready for you. My daughter gave some noncommittal reply, but Chloe continued, no, seriously. My parents are never home, we just get takeout every night. It's like your house feels like a real home, it's so calm here. I stopped what I was doing, just stood there listening. Another time, I overheard Chloe say, my dad wouldn't know how to boil an egg, it's cool that your dad cooks for you. And then another friend on a different day said, you're so lucky your dad is always around. My dad travels for work like all the time, I barely see him. These little comments, these offhand observations from the outside world, started to seep in. I didn't say anything to her about it, but I noticed a change. The sharp edges of her frustration began to soften. She'd linger at the dinner table for a few minutes longer, Instead of rushing off, she'd sometimes even ask need any help with the dishes. The real turning point was a Saturday afternoon. She had a group project to work on, and three of her friends came over. They were spread out at the dining room table, books and laptops everywhere. I was puttering around trying to stay out of the way. But I brought them some snacks and drinks. One of the girls, Sarah, looked up at me and said, "Mr. Miller, this is really good." It was just some homemade lemonade and cookies. I smiled and said thanks. As I was walking away, I heard Sarah say to my daughter, "You never told us your dad was like a master chef. This is amazing." And then she added, her voice dropping a little, "My parents are getting divorced. It's just really loud at my house all the time. It's so peaceful here." I went into the kitchen and just stood by the sink, looking out the window. My eyes were stinging. It wasn't what the girl had said exactly. It was the silence that followed from my daughter. She didn't brush it off. She didn't make a joke. There was just a long, quiet moment. And in that silence, I think she was finally seeing it. She was seeing our life, our home, through their eyes, not as something lacking, but as something solid, something safe. Later that night, after her friends had left, she came into the kitchen where I was wiping down the counters. She leaned against the doorway. Her arms crossed. The house was quiet again, but this quiet felt different, lighter. She took a deep breath. "Dad," she said, her voice was small. I am sorry." I stopped wiping and looked at her. "For what, kiddo?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I could only stare at her. Her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes, were now glassy, shining with tears. She was fiercely refusing to let fall. She was holding them back, using all her strength to keep her voice steady. For being a jerk, for saying you embarrass me." She looked down at her feet. "Chloe and Sarah were talking today about their families, and I guess I never really thought about it." She came and sat on a stool at the kitchen island. She started talking, her words tumbling out. She talked about how her friends saw me, how they noticed the little things, like the fact that I always packed her a lunch, even though she was 16, how they thought it was cool, that I knew how to fix things around the house, how one of them said she wished her dad was as present as I was. "I think I was just so focused on what we didn't have," she said, her voice trembling a little. "I was so busy being mad that Mom wasn't here, that I didn't see what was right in front of me. I didn't see you." She looked at me, then really looked at me, and her eyes were filled with tears. "All the things I thought were embarrassing, they were just you trying, and I am so sorry." We talked for a long time. That night, really talked for the first time in years. She acknowledged things I never thought she'd noticed, the times I'd stayed up late helping her with a paper even though I had to be up early for work, the way I'd always made sure she had a new dress for the dance, even if it meant I had to work overtime to pay for it. She said, "You never complained, you just did it." That conversation changed everything. It was like a dam had broken. The wall she'd built came down. Now it's different. She doesn't sink in the car seat anymore. Sometimes she even asks me to pick her up. She'll point me out to her friends. "That's my dad," she'll say. And there's a note of pride in her voice that I never thought I'd hear. The other day, I overheard her on the phone. She was talking to someone, and she said, "Yeah, my dad's the best. He's a single dad, and he literally did everything. He's like a superhero." I had to go into another room because I didn't want her to see me cry. That period of embarrassment, that sting of her words, it was a hurdle, a really painful one. But we had to go through that fire for her to see me clearly, and for me to understand that my efforts weren't invisible, they were just waiting for the right light. Our bond wasn't broken by that difficult time. It was forged in it. It's stronger now, and more honest than I ever could have imagined. The house has always felt like two different countries under one roof. On my side, the world I brought with me, the smell of spices toasting in a pan, the sound of my language filling the kitchen in the morning, the bright colors of the fabrics where on special days it was my anchor, the weight of my history. It was everything I knew to be good and right and safe. And then there was her world, my daughter's world, the world of her school, her friends, the television shows she watched, a world of different sounds, different smells, different rules. For a long time, I thought we could just exist side by side, these two countries. I didn't realize she was living in the borderland between them, and that it was a place of constant tension. "This," she said, gesturing vaguely at the party. "The lights, the noise, all of this, it's just another way to avoid everything, isn't it? To pretend to never have to actually feel anything difficult." It started with the small things, the lunches I packed for her. I would make her favorite dishes, things my own mother made for me. I'd wrap them carefully, thinking of the love I was putting into that container. But she started leaving the container in her locker untouched. She'd come home hungry, and I'd find the food still there the next day. She'd say she wasn't hungry at school, but her eyes told a different story. Then it was the curfews, all her friends could stay out later. She'd say they could go to the movies on a school night, they could hang out at the mall unsupervised. I tried to explain that where I come from, this is how we show we care, we protect, we keep close to her. It just felt like a cage. She would look at me, sometimes a look I couldn't quite decipher back then. It was a mixture of frustration and a deep aching pity. The real chasm opened during her freshman year. There was a school dance, a big event. She spent weeks talking about it, about the dress she wanted, the shoes. I was so happy for her. I offered to take her shopping, but she wanted to go with her friends. When the day came, she looked beautiful in her modern dress. But I had a special surprise for her. It was a piece of jewelry from my mother, a traditional necklace, intricate and heavy with meaning. I thought it would add a touch of elegance, a connection to her family. Her face fell when I showed it to her. She said it was too much, that it didn't match, that it would look strange. I insisted, just a little. I told her it was for good luck. She wore it, but her shoulders were slumped the entire night. She looked in the mirror not with pride, but with resignation. The breaking point was a school event, a kind of open house for parents. I dressed in what I considered my best clothes, a nice formal outfit from my culture. I was proud of how I looked. I remember walking into the school auditorium, holding a plate of sweets I had made to share with the other parents. I saw her immediately standing with a group of her friends. Her eyes went wide. When she saw me, she didn't come over to greet me, she just stared, and her face flushed a deep, painful red. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to smile, to walk towards her, but she quickly turned away and pretended to be engrossed in a conversation with her friend. Later that night, the silence in the car was heavier than any noise. When we got home, she didn't go upstairs. She stood in the kitchen, her arms crossed tightly. And then it came out. It wasn't a shout, it was worse. It was a quiet, trembling torrent of words she had been holding back for years. She told me I embarrassed her. She said my clothes were weird, that the food I made smelled up the whole house, that my accent was thick, and her friends couldn't understand me. She said she just wanted a normal mom, a mom who would wear jeans and make pizza and blend in. She said she was tired of having to explain me to everyone, tired of feeling different because of me. Each word was like a small, sharp stone. I stood there feeling the weight of my traditions, my language, my entire life being rejected. This wasn't just about a necklace or a plate of food. This was about me. She was rejecting me, the love I poured into every meal, the pride I felt in my heritage, the very journey I had made to give her this life. It all felt cheap and meaningless. I didn't know what to say. The country I had built for her inside our home, she saw as a prison. I felt a profound isolation, a loneliness so deep it was like a physical chill. I just turned and went to my room, and I cried for the first time in many years. I cried for the daughter I thought I had, and for the gulf that had opened up between us. That's not true, I managed to whisper, but the protest was weak, pathetic. It was exactly true. For weeks the house was cold. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary. I stopped packing her lunches. I started buying the frozen pizzas she liked. I wore simpler, plainer clothes. I felt like I was erasing myself piece by piece, and it was the most exhausting thing I have ever done. But the silence was worse than the effort. The shift began slowly, and it came from a place I never expected. Her friends. She had this one friend in particular, a girl named Chloe. Chloe was different. She was curious. She came over one afternoon, and she smelled the dinner I was cooking. Instead of wrinkling her nose, she asked what it was. Her question was genuine. I told her, and I explained the spices. Her eyes lit up. She asked if it was difficult to make. It was such a small thing, but it was the first time in so long that someone had shown interest instead of judgment. Another time, a few of them were over, and they saw an old photo album on the shelf. It had pictures of my hometown, of my family wearing clothes that must have looked like costumes to them. Chloe was the one who asked to see it. They gathered around, and they started asking questions. Where was this? What was that building? Why were people dressed like that? I found myself talking, telling them stories about the markets, the festivals, my own grandmother. I wasn't a source of embarrassment in that moment. I was a source of stories. I was a person with a history. My daughter was listening. She wasn't saying anything, but she was watching her friends' faces, seeing their fascination instead of their ridicule. Chloe started coming over more often. She'd ask me how to say certain words in my language. She'd compliment the scarf I wore. She became a kind of translator, but not between languages. She was translating between worlds. She was showing my daughter through her own curiosity that my culture wasn't something to be hidden away. It was something interesting, something valuable. My daughter started to watch these interactions from a distance at first, but then she began to inch closer. One Saturday, I was in the kitchen making the dough for bread, the way my mother taught me. My daughter came and stood in the doorway. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she asked quietly if I could show her how to do it. My heart felt like it stopped. I just nodded, not trusting my voice. I showed her how to knead the dough, the specific rhythm and pressure. I told her about how my mother would sing a particular song. While she did it, she listened. Her hands, at first clumsy and unsure, started to mimic my movements. We didn't talk much, but the silence was different now. It was a comfortable shared silence. That was the beginning of the bridge. She started asking questions, real questions, not accusations disguised as questions. She asked about what it was like growing up where I did. She asked why we celebrated certain holidays. She asked about her grandparents, people she had only met a few times. I shared everything. I told her stories I hadn't thought about in decades. I showed her how to cook the dishes she had once been ashamed of. And something changed in her. The defensiveness melted away. She stopped hide her background and started to explore it. She took a small step closer, and her intensity was like a physical force. Do you remember when I was 14? And I came to you after Mom, after she left. I was crying. I was so lost. And you know what you did? You patted my shoulder. You said, "Well, be fine, don't worry." And then you went back to your study. You closed the door. The biggest moment was her junior prom. She was getting ready upstairs, and she came down wearing her dress. It was a beautiful modern dress. But in her hands, she held the necklace, the same one she had refused to wear years before. She asked me if I would help her put it on. I fastened the clasp, my fingers trembling slightly. And she looked at herself in the hall mirror. She didn't look resigned. She looked proud. She said it was unique. She said it made her outfit special. That night, when her date arrived, she didn't hurry me away. She introduced him to me properly. She even explained what the necklace was, where it came from. There was no shame in her voice, only a quiet sense of ownership. The divide didn't vanish completely. We still have our moments of misunderstanding. But it's no longer a chasm, it's a shared space now. She now packs her own lunches. And sometimes they are the foods I taught her how to make. She'll text me questions about a word or a custom. What was once a source of friction became the foundation of a new understanding. I realized that my culture wasn't a barrier between us. It was the very thing that could connect us, if we approached it with openness instead of fear. She taught me that her desire to fit in wasn't a rejection of me, but a natural part of finding her place in the world. And I hope I taught her that the parts of herself she once thought she had to hide are actually the parts that make her strong and unique. We found a way to build a hybrid identity, a beautiful blend of her world and mine. And that bond, forged from that initial pain, is stronger than anything I could have imagined. You know, I really thought I had it all figured out, the whole parenting thing. I saw other dads, you know, the ones who were always laying down the law, setting curfews, getting into arguments about clothes and music. And I swore I'd never be that guy. I was determined to be different, the cool dad. It started when my daughter Chloe hit middle school. Suddenly, I wasn't just dad anymore. I was this potential source of embarrassment. I could feel it. She'd flinch if I waved too enthusiastically, dropping her off. She'd give me this look if I used a phrase that was apparently from the dark ages. And it scared me, the idea of becoming irrelevant, of being this figure she tolerated, but didn't actually like. I couldn't stand it. So I made a conscious decision. I wasn't just going to be her father, I was going to be her friend. I dove in head first. I started listening to her music in the car, not just tolerating it, but trying to learn the artists' names, the albums. I'd drop what I thought was the latest slang into conversations, phrases like bet and no cap. I'd say them with this exaggerated casualness. And I'd watch for her reaction. At first she'd just giggle. It felt like a win. She thought I was funny. I took it as approval. Then it was the clothes. I traded in my usual polo shirts for graphic tees of bands I'd only just heard of. I bought a pair of those expensive sneakers all the kids were wearing. I even tried to get a handle on the social media apps, the ones she and her friends lived on. I wanted to be in on the joke. I wanted to be part of the inner circle. And the rules, well, the rules started to get flexible. Curfew became more of a suggestion. If she wanted to go to a party, my first question, stopped being who's chaperoning, and became what are you wearing. I was so focused on being the easygoing, understanding dad that I forgot to be the responsible one. I'd see her push a boundary, and instead of reinforcing it, I'd give a nervous laugh and say, well, just this once. I was so afraid that saying no would shatter this fragile, cool persona I'd built. A memory sharp and painful flashed behind my eyes. I remembered the fear I felt seeing her so hurt, and my own utter inability to fix it, so I had retreated into silence. For a while it seemed to work. She'd laugh at my attempts to be trendy, she'd roll her eyes. But it was a fond roll, she'd even sometimes explain a meme to me. I felt like I was winning. I was the dad who got it, the dad her friends wished they'd come over and say things like, your dad is so cool, and I'd bask in it. I thought I'd cracked the code. But then things started to shift. It was subtle at first. The laughter, when I used slang, felt a little less genuine, a little more pitying. The eye rolls became longer, heavier. She stopped asking me to explain things to her mom. When she wanted permission for something, she'd come directly to me, knowing I was the easier target. I was being managed, and the dynamic felt less like a friendship and more like she was humoring me. The breaking point came on a Friday night. She was getting ready to go out with her friends, seniors in high school now. She was wearing an outfit that was, frankly, a bit much. My wife had already expressed her concerns, but I'd brushed it off. It's just how kids dress these days, I'd said, feeling proud of my open-mindedness. Chloe was in the hallway checking her reflection in the mirror. I walked up, leaning against the doorframe, trying to sound casual. Hey, you look fire, I said, using a word I'd heard her use a dozen times. She stopped, her hands freezing as she adjusted her hair. She didn't turn around right away. She just looked at my reflection in the mirror. And her expression, it wasn't amusement, it wasn't fond exasperation. It was something else, something cold and disappointed. Then she turned around slowly. What did you just say? I said, a nervous chuckle escaping me. Fire, it means you look good. I know what it means, she said, her voice flat. Why do you do that? Do what? I asked, genuinely confused. I thought I was playing my part perfectly. Talk like that, try to dress like you're my age, try to be one of us. It's embarrassing. And when I got into college, she continued, her voice gaining strength, you were so proud, you told everyone. But when I told you, I was scared that I didn't think I could do it. You just laughed it off. You said, of course, you can. You never asked why I was scared. You never sat down with me and talked about it. The word hit me like a physical blow. Embarrassing. That was the very thing I had been trying to avoid. I am just trying to connect with you, Chloe. I am trying to be, cool. And that's when she said it, the sentence that dismantled everything. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the entire hallway. Dad, I don't need a cool friend. I have friends. I need a parent. Why can't you just be a normal parent? I just stood there, my mouth opened, but no sound came out. All my efforts, all the energy I'd poured into being the dad she wanted, and it had culminated in this moment of pure, unvarnished rejection. She wasn't pushing back against my authority. She was lamenting its absence. The graphic tee I was wearing suddenly felt like a costume, a pathetic costume. She shook her head, a sad look in her eyes. It just feels like you're trying too hard, and it makes me feel like you think I am stupid, that I'd be won over by you saying bet instead of just being yourself. She grabbed her purse and walked past me. I'll be back by 11, she said, and it wasn't a request, it was a statement. The door closed, and I was left alone in the silent house with the echo of her words. The confusion was overwhelming. I felt unappreciated after all I'd done to be the fun, understanding dad. This was the thanks I got. But under the confusion, a deeper, more uncomfortable feeling was stirring, shame. Because a part of me knew she was right. I hadn't been trying to connect, I'd been trying to buy her affection with permissiveness and a pathetic imitation of youth. I was so afraid of being the bad guy that I'd failed to be the good father. The next few days were quiet. A heavy tension hung in the house. I didn't know what to do or say. The cool dad script was torn up, and I had no other lines. I had to just be quiet. And in that silence, I started to really look at myself. I thought about my own father. He was never my friend, he was my dad. He was stern, sometimes too stern. But I always knew where I stood with him. There was a solidity to him, a reliability that I realized I had completely abandoned in my quest to be liked. I made a decision. It was terrifying. I decided to stop performing. I was going to be myself, my actual 48-year-old self, the one who likes classic rock and dad jokes. and thinks ripped jeans are a mystery, the one who knows how to change a tire and gives advice about saving money. I was going to reclaim my role not as a peer but as a parent. It started small. I put the graphic tees in a drawer and went back to my polo shirts when Chloe asked if she could go to a concert on a school night. I didn't immediately say yes. I took a breath and said, "Let's talk about it. What's your plan for getting your homework done? How are you getting there?" And back, she looked shocked, then annoyed, then she sighed. "And we actually had a conversation." I said no. It was hard. She was furious. She called me unreasonable. But for the first time in years, it felt like I was being honest. There was a period of adjustment, a lot of distance, shed, eat dinner quickly, and retreat to her room. The house was often silent. It felt like I was failing all over again. I wondered if I'd lost her for good. But I stuck with it. I started setting boundaries consistently, not with a trying to cool attitude, but with a calm, firm resolve. I was present, but I wasn't trying to infiltrate her world anymore. Another memory, her face pale and anxious, holding the acceptance letter, my blustering confidence, a shield against her fear, and against my own. Then something shifted. It was a Saturday afternoon. A few months later, Chloe was having a couple of her friends over to study. I was in the kitchen making myself a coffee, listening to my music, some old Springsteen album at a reasonable volume. I wasn't trying to hide it, or act like I was listening to something else. One of her friends, Maya, came into the kitchen to get a glass of water. She heard the music and smiled. "Springsteen, my dad loves him." "Yeah," I said, "he's the boss." Maya laughed, a real genuine laugh. "That's a good one." She lingered for a minute. "Thanks for having us over, Mr. Davis. Your house is always so calm." It was an odd thing to say, but it struck me. Calm, not cool calm. Later, I brought out a plate of snacks. I overheard a snippet of their conversation. As I walked down the hall, they were talking about college applications. The stress of it all. I paused for a second before going in. Chloe was saying, "I don't know, I am just so overwhelmed by it." And I heard Maya reply, "You should talk to your dad." My mom said he helped her figure out the financial aid stuff for my brother. She said he's really smart about that kind of thing. I walked in and set the plate down. "Just some fuel for the brain," I said. "Let me know if you need anything." There was a moment of silence. After I left, I didn't linger to eavesdrop. But I felt something different in the air. Later, after her friends had left, Chloe came and found me in the living room. I was reading a book. My smile felt like it was carved onto my face. It was a practice thing. This expression, I'd perfected it over years of similar events. You see an acquaintance across the room, you make eye contact. You give the nod, the smile, you lift your glass a little. It's a performance tonight. I was playing the part of the proud parent, the supportive father. Everyone here probably saw me that way. "Look at him. They'd think so happy for his daughter." And I was in a way. But the happiness was buried under layers of something else. Every time she said, and now the tremor was more pronounced, every single time something real happened, something hard or messy or important, you found a way to sidestep it. You'd make a joke, you'd change the subject, you'd buy me a present, you'd throw a party. She looked around the room again, and her expression was one of pure undiluted pain. "This is just the biggest, most expensive version of you changing the subject." She sat on the arm of the sofa. Hey, I said, putting my book down. Maya said her mom thinks you're a genius with financial forms. I chuckled. "Well, I wouldn't go that far, I just know how to read the fine print." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "Yeah, well, thanks for the snacks." She started to get up, then stopped. "They like you know my friends." I looked at her, waiting. "They think you're a solid," she said, and she gave me a small, real smile before she went upstairs. Solid, it was the opposite of cool. Cool is fleeting, a performance. Solid is permanent, its foundation. That night, I realized something in my desperate attempt to be her friend. I had made myself small and unreliable in stepping back into my own skin, into the authentic, sometimes uncool role of a father. I had finally given her something to respect. I wasn't trying to be liked anymore, I was just being her dad. And in the end, that was the only thing she ever really needed me to be. The music was loud that night, the kind of bass that vibrates right through the floor and up into your bones. And the lights, all purple and blue, were flashing in time, with the beat making everyone look like they were moving in a series of still photographs. It was a school dance, the big one at the end of the year. I was so proud to be there, to see you all dressed up. You looked so grown up. I remember thinking how fast it had all gone. I was standing near the punch bowl trying to look like I belonged there, like I was just another parent chaperone. And not your mom, you were with your friends, a tight little circle of laughter and whispers. Every time I glanced over, I could see you were the center of it. You had that way about you, even then a magnetic kind of energy. I felt a swell of pride, so big it almost hurt. I wanted to argue. I wanted to list all the things I had done for her, the schools, the clothes, this very party. But the words stuck in my throat, because I knew with a sudden horrifying clarity that she was right. They were all just actions. They were substitutes for the one thing she had actually needed from me, my presence, my emotional courage. Then you broke away from the group and started walking towards me. My heart did a little leap. I thought you were coming to say hello, to introduce me to someone, to share a piece of your night with me. I straightened up, put on my best smile. But as you got closer, I saw the look on your face. It wasn't excitement or happiness, it was pure, unadulterated dread. You stopped a few feet away, close enough to be heard over the music, but not close enough for a hug. You leaned in, your voice, a low, urgent whisper that cut through the thumping bass. Mom, you said, could you just stand over there, by the doors? You're embarrassing me. You didn't even wait for an answer. You just turned around and walked back to your friends, melting back into the safety of your circle. And I just stood there, the smile frozen on my face. The music seemed to get louder, the lights harsher. I felt like I was under a spotlight. Exposed. All the other parents, chatting nearby, suddenly felt like an audience. I could feel their eyes on me. Or at least I thought I could. I remember looking down at my clothes, wondering what was wrong with them. Was I standing wrong? Had I said something to one of your friends? I replayed every interaction from the last hour, searching for my crime. But the crime was just being your mom in that moment. That's what it felt like. My very existence was the embarrassment, the love I felt, the pride that was bursting out of me. It was all too much, too visible, too mom-like. I did what you asked. I moved slowly to the doors, feeling like I was walking through water. I spent the rest of the night watching you from a distance, a ghost at your feast. That phrase, you're embarrassing me. It became a loop in my head. It played over and over, a soundtrack to my failure. I wore that moment like a scar for years. It shaped how I saw myself in your life. I became more cautious, more hesitant to show up, to be seen. I was always afraid of tripping that wire again, of being too much. The years that followed were quiet, not bad necessarily. You went to college, started your career. We had phone calls, holidays, they were pleasant, surface level. We talked about your classes, your job, the weather. We carefully avoided the deep waters. There was an unspoken agreement to let that moment at the dance fade. But it was always there, a faint chill in the room. I learned to hold back a little piece of my heart, to keep my pride in check. Just in case it was too loud, too embarrassing. I convinced myself that this was just what happened when children grew up. They created distance. It was natural, but it never felt natural. It felt like a wound that never quite closed. Then things began to shift. It was so gradual I almost didn't notice. You started calling me, not just on Sundays, but on a random Tuesday evening. You'd ask for my opinion on a work problem, something you would have figured out on your own, before you started telling me stories about your friends, your life, the small frustrations and joys. There was a new ease between us. The holidays felt lighter, the conversations lingered a little longer. We could laugh about things from the past, the silly things, without the shadow of that dance falling over us. It was like a slow thaw after a long winter. I didn't dare mention it for fear of breaking the spell. But I felt it, the distance was closing. And I started to understand, maybe for the first time, that your embarrassment wasn't about me. Not really, it was about you. It was about a teenager trying to carve out a space for herself, desperate to fit in, to be independent. My love was a constant, a fact of your life, so big and so steady that you could push against it. Because you knew, on some level, it would never budge. The embarrassment was a phase. The love was the foundation. She looked directly at me, and her eyes were no longer just glassy. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. You taught me how to be quiet. You taught me how to pretend that everything is okay when it's not, but you never taught me how to be brave, because you're not brave. And then came your wedding day. The air itself seemed to sparkle. The whole day was a blur of happiness. But I remember every detail of you, how you looked in your dress, the way you held his hand, the sheer radiant joy on your face. My heart felt so full I thought it might burst. Any lingering ghost from that night at the dance was banished by the sheer light of that day. I was just so proud, proud of the woman you had become, proud to be your mother, proud to sit there and witness your happiness. During the reception after the dinner, The best man gave his speech, it was funny and warm, then your new husband spoke, his voice was thick with emotion, as he talked about you, and I felt tears in my own eyes. And then you stood up, you picked up the microphone, the room quieted down, all eyes on you. You looked out at everyone a little nervous. But then your gaze found mine, you smiled a small private smile, just for me, and you took a deep breath. Your voice was clear and steady, but I could hear the emotion trembling just beneath the surface. You started by thanking everyone for coming. You talked about your husband, beautiful words that made everyone laugh and cry. And then you paused, you looked directly at me again. And there's someone else I need to thank, you said. My mom. My breath caught in my throat. You continued, Mom, I need to tell you a story. I think I was about 16. There was a school dance. And you told the story I had carried like a weight for a decade. You described your own perspective, the crushing social anxiety of being a teenager, the desperate need to seem cool, to not have your mom be too mom-like. You didn't excuse it, you just explained it. And then you said the words I didn't know I needed to hear until that moment. You stood by those doors all night, you said, your voice softening. You didn't complain, you didn't get angry, you just gave me the space I thought I needed. And I think I knew even then how unfair I was being. But what I really want to say is thank you for your patience, thank you for your unwavering love, even when I was a nightmare teenager who definitely didn't deserve it. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. You looked right at me, your own eyes shining. You taught me what unconditional love looks like. You showed me that being a parent isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, it's about being a steady presence, a safe harbor, even when the kid in the harbor is rolling her eyes and telling you to stand farther away. You never stopped showing up. You never stopped loving me, and everything. I am the woman standing here today, so proud and so happy. It's because I had your example. I can only hope to be half the parent you were to me. The room erupted in applause, but I hardly heard it. All I could see was you. You put the microphone down and walked straight towards me. I stood up, and we embraced right there in front of everyone. It wasn't a quick, polite hug. It was a full, deep, soul-encompassing embrace. I felt years of distance and misunderstanding dissolve in that single moment. I felt your forgiveness, and my own washing over me. You held me tight and whispered in my ear, I am so proud you're my mom. We stood like that for a long time, and I realized, holding you, that the painful moment from all those years ago wasn't a scar anymore. It was just a chapter, a necessary chapter in our story. It was the contrast that made this moment, this profound and public declaration of love, so blindingly bright. That night at the dance taught me patience. It taught me to love you in the way you needed, even when it hurt. And it made me appreciate this journey, every single difficult and beautiful step of it. She took a shaky breath, and then she said the words. They didn't feel like an insult, they felt like a diagnosis, a final, irrevocable verdict. Time, growth, and a love that never wavered, that's what healed us. The circle was finally closed. The little girl who was embarrassed by me was now the woman who stood before her friends and family and said she wanted to be like me. There is no greater vindication. There is no greater gift. The memory of that hurtful comment didn't disappear, but it was finally completely overwritten by the truth in your voice on your wedding day, the truth that you were proud of me, and that was everything. You're just a cowardly fool. The moment the words left her lips, the world around me underwent a fundamental change. The loud, vibrant party didn't disappear, but it became distant, like I was hearing it from the bottom of a well. The music was still playing, but it was just a muffled beat. The laughter from other groups sounded tinny and fake, like a bad recording. The sweeping colored lights weren't festive anymore, they were harsh, interrogating. They spotlighted me, exposed me for what I was. I could feel every single one of them on my skin burning. All I could hear was the thick pounding rush of blood in my ears. My own heartbeat was a deafening drum. My vision narrowed, the edges of the room blurring into a smear of color, and all I could see with perfect, cruel clarity was my daughter's face etched with a pain I had caused. And then the memories came not as thoughts, but as full sensory flashbacks crashing over me one after another. I saw her at 8 years old, standing at the door of my home office asking if I could play, and me waving her away with a later sweetie daddy's, busy. I saw her at 16 trying to tell me about a boy who had hurt her feelings, and me making an awkward joke about teenage drama. Instead of listening, I saw the slow, quiet erosion of her attempts to reach me, each one met with my polite evasion, my emotional absence. I had built a wall between us, brick by brick, with every avoided conversation, every difficult choice I had sidestepped. something heavy and anxious. My hands started to tremble at my sides. I clenched them into fists to try and stop it. But the tremor was deep inside, a vibration of pure shame. My throat was so tight I could barely swallow. The impulse to defend myself, to shout that she was wrong, that she was ungrateful, rose up in me like a wave. But it was immediately drowned, crushed under the weight of this tidal wave of truth, her anger, her sharp, painful words. They weren't an attack, they were a reflection, a perfect, terrible mirror held up to show me the pain I had caused, and then ignored for years. I had been a coward, not in a dramatic running from danger way, but in a slow, insidious way, a cowardice of the heart. She didn't say anything else, she just looked at me for a long moment, her expression, a mixture of sorrow and finality. Then she turned, she walked away, moving through the crowd with a straight back. And the space she left behind it was the most profound silence I have ever experienced. It was a vacuum, the music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, none of it could penetrate that silence. It was a void created by her absence, and it was filled only with the echo of her words. I stood there completely frozen, a statue of regret, under the glittering disco ball. People moved around me, laughing, dancing, completely unaware that my entire world had just shattered. I watched her go, until she was swallowed by the crowd. And in that stillness, that awful, revealing stillness, I finally understood. The cowardice wasn't just about the things I hadn't done. It wasn't about missing a school play or working late. It was a much deeper failure. It was my refusal to face love honestly. Love isn't just presents and parties and proud smiles. It's also about being brave enough for the hard, messy truth. It's about sitting in the uncomfortable silence with someone you love, without trying to fix it or run from it. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to admit your own fears and shortcomings. I had refused all of that. I had chosen the easy illusion of happiness over the difficult work of real connection. The party began to feel like it was winding down. The music softened. The lights seemed a little less blinding. The crowd thinned out. I remained where I was, anchored to the spot by the weight of my understanding. It was a painful truth, a wound that felt like it would never heal. But as I stood there, a strange thought occurred to me. Perhaps this wound, this raw, honest rupture, was not an ending. The years of polite avoidance had gotten us nowhere. This pain, as acute as it was real. It was a truth. And maybe, just maybe, truth, no matter how painful, was the only possible place for healing to begin. It was a fragile, terrifying hope. But it was the only one I had left there, under the fading party lights. The car was my personal prison. Every single morning, that final block before the middle school was the longest stretch of road in the world. I'd be hunched down in the passenger seat, practically willing myself to become smaller, to just disappear into the upholstery. I'd have my backpack clutched to my chest like a shield. And I'd be praying, just a simple, desperate prayer: please, don't do it today, please, just let me get out without a scene. You always did, without fail, as you pulled up to the curb, amidst the stream of other cars and the clusters of kids. You'd hit me with it. That big booming voice of yours: all right, kiddo, have a stellar day. Remember, knowledge is power, but a good attitude is the supersuit. You'd lean over, and I'd see it coming, the dreaded raised hand for a high five. And I would have to leave you hanging every time. I'd just mumble a thanks and practically throw myself out of the car, my face burning with a heat I was sure everyone could. I saw her then through the shifting crowd, my daughter. She was standing near the large window that overlooked the city, the lights from outside framing her like a halo. She wore a dark blue dress, and she looked radiant, truly. But there was a distance to her. It was in the way she held her champagne flute, not really drinking from it, just turning it slowly in her hand. It was in her laughter. When someone told a joke nearby, she laughed along. But it was a fraction of a second too late, and it didn't quite reach her eyes. They see, I could feel the other kids looking, or at least I thought I could. In that world, the perception of being looked at was just as bad as the real thing. It wasn't just the drop-off, it was everything. The way you dance in the kitchen while making breakfast, this ridiculous, uncoordinated shuffle to some oldie station. I'd cringe, begging you to stop, telling you it was embarrassing, and you just laugh, a real, genuine laugh, and say, you've got to let the joy out sometimes, sweetheart. But I didn't want joy, I wanted anonymity. I wanted you to be invisible, or at least quiet and neutral, a parent who didn't draw attention. The worst was the slang. You'd try so hard to be with it. You'd pick up some phrase you overheard, something that had probably been cool 2 years prior, and you deploy it with the most painful sincerity, calling my friend's dog, or saying something was lit in that careful, deliberate way of yours. It was like a physical ache in my chest. It just shut down my eyes, pleading with you to please, for the love of God, just be normal to me. You were a walking, talking social liability, a constant threat to my fragile standing. World where the wrong shoes, the wrong haircut, the wrong parent could mean social oblivion. I needed you to conform to be a silhouette, a background character. In the story of my life that was just beginning, I didn't see you, I only saw how you reflected on me. I didn't notice the shift at first, it was gradual like the tide going out. High school started, and the world got bigger instantly. The hallways were louder, the kids were more varied, there were kids who were genuinely cool not because they followed the rules, but because they broke them with confidence, artists, musicians, kids who argued with teachers about politics. The social hierarchy of middle school, which had felt like a matter of life and death, started to seem small, silly even. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had a new friend over, Sarah. She was one of those people who seemed older, more grounded. We were in the kitchen getting a snack. And you walked in from work, you were your usual self, a little tired. But you smiled and asked Sarah about her day. You didn't try to be cool, you were just you, and you made some comment about the weather, a simple dad observation. And Sarah laughed, not a mocking laugh, but a real one. She said, "You're a funny Mr. Davis." It was such a small thing, but it stuck with me later. She said to me, "Your dad seems really nice. My dad just grunts when he gets home." It was the first time I'd ever considered that your constant engagement, your attempts to connect, even the cringy ones, might be a feature, not a bug. I started to notice other things, how you always asked about my classes. Not just my grades, how you remembered my friends' names. You were just consistently there, a steady presence in the background of my increasingly chaotic life. You never forced it. You never guilt-tripped me for my earlier rejection. You just kept showing up, quiet and unwavering. The plan was for a group of us to meet up at my house before going to a movie. It felt like a big deal. These were my people, the friends I'd carefully curated in high school, the ones whose opinions I valued most. I was nervous. A part of me was still that middle schooler worried about what would happen when my world collided with yours. I gave you the usual pre-briefing, just, be normal, don't tell any embarrassing stories, maybe just say hi. And then, I don't know, go read in the other room or something. You just smiled, this quiet smile, and said, "Okay, honey, I'll try not to embarrass you." But there was a look in your eye, a knowing glint that I didn't understand at the time. We're scanning the room, restless, and every time her gaze drifted near me, it would slide away, a conscious avoidance. It was a dance we'd been doing all night, this careful avoidance of direct contact. They all arrived in a noisy bunch, filling the hallway with backpacks and chatter, and you were just yourself. You came out, said a warm hello to everyone. And then, instead of disappearing, you started asking them questions, real questions about the movie they were seeing, about a band. One of them had on their t-shirt. You were genuinely interested. And then someone noticed the old guitar case in the corner of the living room. "You play?" my friend Mark asked, his tone surprised. You shrugged a little. "Used to play more when I was younger." They pressed you and you finally gave, and you took out the guitar, this beautiful worn-out acoustic, and you sat down, and you started to play not some cheesy old song, but a real intricate folk melody. Your fingers moved with a practiced ease I had never seen. You were lost in it. For a moment your face relaxed and focused. The room went quiet. My friends weren't just being polite, they were genuinely captivated. Then you told a story. You talked about learning that song from a friend you'd backpacked with through Europe after college. You described sleeping on trains and playing for your supper in town squares. You talked about being young and stupid and free. You weren't dad in that moment. You were a person with a history, with adventures, with a life that existed long before I did. My friends were leaning in, laughing at your stories, asking more questions. They saw you not as a parent, but as a cool, interesting guy who had lived a life. And I saw you through their eyes. I saw the humor, the patience, the quiet confidence I had always mistaken for uncoolness. The very things I had been so embarrassed by were the things they were now responding to. Your authenticity was magnetic. After they left, the house felt strangely quiet. I was helping you clean up, my mind racing. I couldn't quite process what had happened. The image of you calmly telling that story, your friends listening with rapt attention, was stuck in my head. It had dismantled my entire perception of you. I found you in the kitchen putting glasses in the dishwasher. You were humming that same tune you'd played on the guitar. I leaned against the doorway, my arms crossed, not sure how to start. You looked up and smiled. "Nice kids," you said simply. "Yeah," I said, and then the words came out softer than I intended. "My friends, they really liked you." You paused, a glass in your hand, and looked at me, really looked at me. Oh, that's good you said your voice even. But then for one single suspended moment, it happened the crowd parted just enough and her eyes, those same eyes I'd watched change from infant blue to this deep thoughtful brown locked with mine. It wasn't a glance, it was a connection, it was fragile, a thread stretched taut across the noisy room in that second. All the music and laughter faded into a dull roar. I saw the question there unspoken, but clear as day it was a question I'd seen forming for years. And I had never ever had an answer for it, I just held. I took a breath. No, I mean they really liked you, Sarah said. She wished her dad was more like you, Mark. Said you were cool. The word felt foreign in my mouth, directed at you. But it was true. You didn't gloat, you didn't say I told you, so you just nodded a slow, thoughtful nod. And then you said, well, I like them too, you've chosen good friends. And that was it, that was the moment, the years of tension of me pushing you away, of me seeing you as an obstacle to my social survival, just evaporated in its place. Was this overwhelming, humbling feeling of respect. I saw the strength it had taken for you to be consistently yourself day after day. In the face of my rejection, I saw the love in that consistency. You never stopped being you even when I made it clear. I didn't want that version of you, you just waited patiently for me to grow up enough to see it. The lesson wasn't that you had become cool, the lesson was that my definition of cool had been childish and shallow authenticity. It turns out, is the coolest thing there is. It can't be faked or performed, it's just being. And you had been doing it all along. The dad jokes, the kitchen dancing, the terrible slang, it was all part of a person who was unafraid to be genuinely happily himself. And my friends, with their more mature perspectives, saw it instantly. They saw the value. I had been too blind to see the redemption. Wasn't you changing, it was me finally seeing you clearly, and the person I saw was, and always had been, pretty awesome. Alright, so I have to tell you about my peak cringe dad era. I mean, we're talking about a real treasure trove of embarrassment. Here it was a golden age of awfulness, truly. It started with the fashion, of course. I had this one sweater. Oh, you'd have loved this sweater. It was this vibrant, heinous, turquoise number with a giant grinning cartoon moose on the front. The moose was wearing sunglasses. I thought it was the height of cool. I'd wear it to school, pick up to the grocery store, proudly displaying my moose pal for all the world to see. My daughter Sarah would see me coming, and she would just deflate. Her entire body would just sigh. She'd slide down in the passenger seat of the car. So low, I am surprised her knees weren't up by her ears. Dad, please, she'd whisper, can you just not? But the sweater was just the opening act. Then there were my attempts to be hip, to use the lingo. I'd overhear her talking to her friends, and I'd try to jump in that homework assignment. Is totally sus, am I right? No cap. The silence that followed was louder than any music. It was a wall of pure, unadulterated teenage judgment. She'd just stare at me, her face a perfect mask of horrified pity. And the cheering at her soccer games. I wasn't just a supportive parent, I was a one-man hype squad. I had these elaborate specific cheers instead of go Sarah. It was that's my progeny, exhibit superior foot-eye coordination. I'd be doing a little jig on the sidelines. She told me once in a voice strained with desperation that she would give me $20 if I would just please drop her off a block away from school, just one block. That's all she asked, for a one-block radius of non-affiliation. Her gaze, my polite smile, feeling like a grotesque lie, until she was the one to break it, turning back to her friends. I had this dance too, don't ask me where it came from. It was a sort of hybrid between what I imagined a robot would do and someone trying to swat a very persistent fly. I'd break it out at family gatherings, at barbecues. Sarah's signature move was the slow, dramatic turn away, putting her back to me, as if by not seeing it, it wasn't actually happening. Her catchphrase during this period was a long, drawn-out dad that contained multitudes. It meant, you are embarrassing me, I am questioning my genetic inheritance, and I wish the ground would swallow me whole, all in one syllable. Then came the plot twist, the seismic shift. Sarah was about 16, and she had a new group of friends. For weeks I'd just heard whispers, Maya, Chloe, Sam. They were the cool friends, the ones she was nervous about me meeting in my mind. They were these ultra-sophisticated, terrifyingly trendy figures who only listened to music that hadn't been invented yet and communicated through ironic memes. She was having them over for the first time for a movie night, and she gave me the pre-meeting briefing. It was like a corporate merger presentation. Okay, dad, ground rules, no mention of the moose sweater. The sweater does not exist. Do not attempt to use slang at all. If you feel a joke coming on, swallow it. Just be quiet, be a piece of furniture, a very quiet, inanimate piece of furniture. I was prepared for the worst. I planned to be a ghost in my own house. I'd just glide through, maybe mutter a quiet hello, and retreat to my study. The doorbell rang. Sarah looked like she was about to face a firing squad. She opened the door and there they were, and they were normal, quirky. But normal. Maya was wearing a t-shirt for a band I actually recognized. Chloe had a vintage camera hanging around her neck. Sam was carrying a well-loved copy of a fantasy novel I'd read myself. I did my quiet hello, my best furniture impression. But then Sam spotted the vinyl record frame on the wall. It's the album cover for that super obscure prog rock band I loved in college, the one nobody's ever heard of. He points at it. His eyes go wide. No way you listen to the Astral Navigators. My jaw almost hit the floor. You know the Astral Navigators? I stammered. Know them. Chloe chimed in. He's obsessed. He's trying to collect all their original pressings. Suddenly, my planned retreat was off. We're talking about the drummer's solo work. Then Maya sees my bookshelf, the one filled with my niche hobby, building ridiculously detailed miniature models of historical sailing ships. She gasps. Is that a fully rigged Spanish galleon? Did you build that? Before I know it, I am explaining the intricacies of threading microscopic rigging lines. The vindication was sweet, and it was instantaneous. The very things that had earned me years of eye rolls were now making me a minor celebrity. Sarah was just standing there watching this unfold with a look of utter confusion, her carefully constructed narrative of me, as the king of cringe was crumbling before her eyes. The pinnacle was when I, feeling emboldened, unleashed one of my most punished dad jokes. I saw Sarah physically flinch, bracing for impact. I said I told my carpenter I wasn't pleased with the drawers in the cabinet he built. He just looked at me and said, well, that's a sketchy situation. There was a beat of silence. Then Sam snort left. Chloe actually clutched her chest. Maya points at me and says with total sincerity, the words that will be etched on my tombstone, you didn't tell us your dad was a legend. The role reversal was delicious. Sarah was now the one off balance. Her cool friends were fawning over her uncool dad. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. She was curious, a little jealous even of the easy rapport I suddenly had with her inner circle. The movie night went on, but they were less interested in the movie and more in hearing my stories about seeing bands in the 90s, or the time I tried to build a canoe in my dorm room. The moment passed, and the noise of the party rushed back in louder than before. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I needed to say something to bridge that gap. I moved through the crowd, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached her little group just as a lull hit their conversation. The new dynamic that followed was something I never could have predicted. The cringe didn't just vanish, it was retroactively rebranded. As charmed Sarah started asking questions. So what was the deal with that band? What other albums did they have shed? Even on occasion ask for my opinion on things. She didn't plead to be dropped off a block away anymore. Once, I saw her pointing out my ship models to one of her other friends, with a hint of pride. The moral of the story, I guess, is that you can't predict what's going to resonate with people. Trying to contort yourself into what you think is cool is a losing game. The moment I gave up, and was just my awkward joke-cracking model shipbuilding self, was the moment I accidentally became cool to the exact audience I was trying to avoid embarrassing my daughter in front of. The funniest part, now my audience has expanded. Sarah's friends will sometimes text me directly, hey Mr. Henderson, got any new jokes, or found a record at a flea market? Is this the B-side you were talking about? And Sarah, instead of cringing, just shakes her head and smiles. She'll say, I can't believe you've adopted my friends, and I'll just smile back. Because I know the truth, I didn't adopt them. They were converted. They saw the light, the beautiful dorky turquoise sweater wearing light. And the best part is, I don't have to hide the sweater anymore. In fact, I think I might just wear it next time they come over for old time's sake. The music was loud, the lights were bright and kind of blinding, and all around me people were laughing. You know, that sound at a party, the hum of a dozen conversations, the clink of glasses. It all just felt like an illusion, a disguise. And I was right in the middle of it, playing my part, smiling, nodding, saying the right things, performing the role of the good parent. I saw her across the room, my daughter. She looked radiant, but distant, like she was on the other side of a glass wall. Her laughter seemed a little forced, and every time I tried to catch her eye, she'd look away. But for 1 second, just a moment, our eyes met across the dance floor. It was a fragile thing, a silent question hanging between us. I didn't have an answer for it. And then it happened. It was a small thing. I said something casual, thoughtless. I saw her expression change, the polite mask just fell away, and what was left was raw and honest. Right there in the middle of all that noise and celebration, her voice started to tremble, but it was firm, her eyes were glassy with tears she was refusing to shed. And she said it, the words cut through the party chaos like a knife, "You're just a cowardly fool." And the craziest part, the crowd kept laughing, the music kept playing. But the lights, they didn't feel festive anymore, they felt harsh, like they were exposing me, not illuminating the room. After she said it, everything just stopped, the sounds around me became muffled, like I was underwater, the colors all blurred together. All I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I placed a hand on her arm. It was meant to be a gentle fatherly gesture. She flinched just slightly, almost imperceptibly. I leaned in, my voice too loud, too cheerful, trying to sound casual. "Having a good time, sweetheart? You've been so busy talking to everyone. I haven't had a chance to steal you away." It was a nothing comment, an empty social pleasantry. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I had made a mistake. My first instinct was to fight back, to defend myself, to explain it all away. But that impulse was just drowned by a tidal wave of shame. And a terrible dawning realization. My mind flashed back to all the moments I let slip, by the conversations I avoided, the difficult choices I sidestepped, the slow, quiet erosion of her trust in me. My hands started to tremble, my throat tightened. I just wanted to disappear into the noise. And I understood with a cruel, intimate clarity that her anger, it was just a reflection, a mirror of a pain I had caused, and then ignored for years. She turned and walked away, and the space she left behind was so silent, so empty, that not even the music could fill it. I just stood there, frozen, a statue of regret under a glittering disco ball, and in that stillness, I finally understood the cowardice wasn't just about the things I didn't do, it was about my refusal to face love honestly, to be brave enough for the hard, messy truth. That moment, that feeling of being utterly exposed and misunderstood by your own child, it's a specific kind of pain. It feels personal, like a direct attack on your character, on your love. But what if it isn't? What if that cringe, that flash of embarrassment in their eyes when you simply exist in their vicinity, is actually a sign of something else, something necessary, even healthy? Let's talk about the science of it. The developmental stage, your teenager's brain is undergoing a massive wholesale renovation. It's not just about hormones and mood swings, it's about identity. Their entire world is shifting from the family unit, where you are the center, to the social world of their peers. Peer approval becomes the most important currency. It's the lens through which they see everything, and you, the parent, you represent that family unit they are biologically programmed to separate from. It's called individuation. They need to become their own person, and to do that they have to push against you. You become a symbol of everything they are trying to move away from. Your clothes, your music, your jokes, the way you walk, it all becomes a potential threat to their carefully constructed social identity. Their brain is hyper-aware of social scrutiny. It's like they have a radar constantly scanning for any potential social misstep. And you, unfortunately, are often the biggest blip on that screen. It's not that they are intentionally cruel, their cognitive wiring is just different now. They perceive social risk in a way we as adults with fully developed prefrontal cortexes simply don't. To them, your existence in a public space isn't just you being there, it's a variable that could destabilize their entire social standing. It's a survival mechanism, primitive but incredibly powerful. So what is your role in all of this? How do you navigate this constant low-grade rejection? The most important thing, and I know it's the hardest thing, is to not take it personally. You have to see it as a phase, a normal, healthy part of their development. It's a sign that they are on track. The kids who don't go through this, who remain overly enmeshed with their parents, often struggle more with independence later on. This embarrassment is a symptom of growth. Your job is to be the anchor in the storm. That means maintaining your boundaries and your consistency. It's tempting to try to change who you are, to dress younger, to use their slang, to become their friend in the hopes of gaining their approval. But that almost always backfires. They don't need a friend who is trying to be a teenager. They need a parent who is a stable, reliable adult. Your consistency provides a secure base. Even when they are pushing you away with all their might, they need to know on some deep subconscious level that you are still there, that the foundation is solid. You are the home they